Hello. Hello.
Hi, Dylan. Hi,
How are
evening.
you?
Or wait, you're 3 hours behind, aren't you? You're in the middle of your afternoon.
Yes, yes. I'm actually kind of a night owl, so this is like still morning for me, but
Okay.
yes, the time difference for sure.
Yeah, well, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I'm sure you're at the end of a packed week of promoting this new project and this new album. So super excited to get to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't I just ask the question I'm kind of curious about is how's the reception been so far? Have you been doing a lot of interviews and talking to folks about flatworm mysticism?
Yeah, yeah, there has been a lot of interviews, and I've been talking to people about it a lot. I mean, we kind of just did the announce the other day, so I think that not a lot of people have really heard it yet. There's the one song, of course, that is out there that people have heard. Um, but yeah, I don't think beyond the press stuff that's gone out and I have a handful of buddies that I've like sent the album to. Beyond that, I don't think a lot of people have even really heard it yet, which is I don't know, it's kind of exciting that they're going to, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super excited to be, at the front, the crest of the wave. I feel like it's gonna
Sure.
happen. Um, yeah, I listened to the single immediately as soon as I saw it.
Right on.
And then I saved my like full listen through for last night because I felt like it would be the kind of thing that I wanted to like really sit with and
Sure, sure, sure.
absorb. So I did make notes like track by track and all that, which
Cool.
I'll pick into a little bit, but
Cool.
I guess my first thought, the thing that got me excited was, the thing that probably most people will say, which is they'll go, "Oh, Dylan from Bell Witch made an ambient album? Oh my God." Like, um, and I've seen Bell Witch twice.
Right on.
Very lucky. The first time, both times here in Toronto, that's where I'm located.
Sure, sure.
Um, First time was on the Mirror Reaper tour, and it was at Coalition, like it's like a little basement club.
Is
Um,
that did it have the Motorhead skull at like the entryway?
yeah,
I remember exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. Which, RIP, that venue is now dead and gone.
Heard that.
But the next time was even better. I feel even more lucky that I got to see the set at Trinity St. Paul's.
Oh God, that was so cool.
Did you love it? I loved it. Everyone loved it.
Shit. I was like reading some of the history about that church and like the stuff that they were doing like, through the 90s, with like the activism in the queer community and whatnot. It was like, this place is fucking cool.
Yeah.
And we got there and walked in and it was like, oh, this place is fucking cool.
Yeah.
It was like magical. The the guy that does visuals for us, Bobby, is like an amazing photographer. And I mean, I think as soon as we all kind of walked in, we had to like load stuff in, and like as it was kind of hitting all of us, it's like giant, beautiful cathedral. We were all like, Bobby, get your fucking camera out, man. That's
Yeah.
cool. And he was like, yeah. On it, on it. It was great.
Yeah. It was somehow it was the first time I actually saw a show in the venue, but like you said, that whole building is like the site of so many cool things.
Yeah.
So I've been to like, community focused things in there. But yeah, it was just mind-boggling. And yeah, I felt that whole, like you're saying, like I do concert photography too. That's kind of like my background. But I didn't even want to pull my camera out as soon as the projection started because I was like, no, don't ruin it. Just like
Oh,
be
cool.
here.
Sure,
Like
sure. That's
um
cool.
yeah, and like from our end, like from the audience end, the effect of like, everything kind of like resonating through the organ tubes
Sure,
is just so incredible. So I hope you felt
sure.
it as well because it was fucking sick.
Unfortunately for me, I had in-ear monitors in the whole time, so everything was kind of muffled. So I didn't get that cool resonance that I imagine was there through the just the room itself. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, yeah, it was like the sound was coming from the organ at first. I feel like people sort of looked around, they were like, what is it? And
That's
then
cool.
realized it wasn't. I brought a friend who had never even heard of Bell Witch before. I said, just come, you're gonna love it. And we were leaving the auditorium and their face was just like, and they were stunned, speechless. They didn't speak for the rest of the night. So
Awesome. Awesome. That's
yeah.
great. Hopefully that's not because they were asleep.
No, no, no. They were fully just
Just kidding.
entranced, you know?
That's very cool. That's very, thanks for telling me that. That's good.
Yeah, yeah, happy to. Happy to. So yeah, I guess my first kind of like thoughts were so both that recent Bell Witch release and the previous one were both like one continuous track, beginning to end, like big piece that you absorb. But with this, with the new project, you've split things up a little bit, at least in terms of like track titles and all of that. Um, I guess the impression I had listening to it last night, I kind of felt like the first, second, and third tracks, like they all bleed into each other. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one, which has been released as a single, it has its own like distinct beginning and end, it seems like,
Hmm.
and you can kind of listen to it. And
Sure.
then the fifth one, I'm like, there's new things happening. It goes up a few octaves. There's like some new elements in there. So yeah, can you tell me a bit about, I guess maybe the first three tracks? Is there like a overarching theme there?
Sure. Yeah, I think the original idea was to kind of make it all track overflowing onto the next. So it was kind of like each one kind of came out of the other one. Um, Different than the Bellwitch approach, of course, but kind of that same idea where it could be listened to continuously through and it would feel like one long piece, maybe, but sectioned. And that totally worked for the first three. And then by the time the fourth one was going, I think it was just kind of like, maybe because it starts off so sparse, like there's almost nothing there at the beginning of it. I was like, this is there's a break here. Like there's just a natural break. It would be forced at that point, I think, to blend it together, and it would take away that sort of that effect of no sound. It would kind of
Yeah.
kill the vibe there. And there, yeah, so the fourth song got split. And there was two others that were gonna kind of be the fifth track, and I kind of just I don't know, kept having second guesses about them. Like maybe they felt like it was just like the wrong vibe, or it felt like they didn't match the other ones. And I felt that one, the one that's on there now, matches it enough. It's different, like you said. Um, but I think as like the end point, it kind of like it works as like a conclusion, maybe, or I don't know. If if there's like a linear direction that the whole thing is going, maybe that's like a good end for it.
Yeah, yeah, I felt that. I thought so. I thought for sure, like, absolutely, probably the next time I listen through to it, I'll try to just like sit there in my like little meditation corner and like see what happens.
Sure, sure.
Um, because for sure, like from the first track, it's kind of like I felt that like soaring through space kind of
Right
effect.
on. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then in the second one, it gets a little bit more droney, and I was like, okay, to keep going with the space metaphor, it's like lifting off.
Sure, sure.
Um, and then the third one I found pretty spooky. Maybe it's just because it's called Corpse Signal. I was like, okay, this is not the kind of ambient that I would just put on because I'm trying to like, read through something or focus. It's definitely like it's saying something. It's kind of like this a bit of like a ghostly voice with like a melodic repetition in there.
Sure, sure, sure. I dig that.
Yeah, I was like, maybe I'm projecting because again, I'm looking at the track titles too
Oh no,
hard.
that's great. That's great. I
Yeah.
love.
Um, yeah, and by the end, I could definitely see that that's like a logical conclusion, but I think you've got more of this in store, right? I think I read that there's this isn't the end of this project. There's lots to come.
Yeah, I'll probably keep tinkering with it and trying to expand on it. I think I've got there's a collaboration record I did with a guy in Memphis that I think he's mixing right now. That'll I don't know when he'll be done with it, but that's already pretty exciting. Um, and I've got like I mean, it's kind of nice because I can just do it here at my house. I don't have to like go into a big expensive fancy studio to have a other engineer tinker with everything. I can kind of tinker with myself, which is fun in the most nerdy way possible.
I've been hearing a
Um,
lot of that lately. A lot of people are saying that they are really enjoying that they can just record. So did you record it yourself?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it kind of came about by during the pandemic, Bell Witch was doing or started doing a Patreon channel where like every month I was making like take like a 5 to 10 minute clip of like an old film and it started off taking demos that we were making for the clandestine gate and some of the other demos from the two albums that'll follow that, and just like recording practice and trying to line it up with a film to where it would like line up in the way that like Dark Side of the Moon and Wizard of Oz kind of line up in this really weird
Okay.
sort of like I don't think that was intentional, but it's fucking perfect. It works.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of going for that same effect, and like in the program trying to line everything up, it was like that can be done. Like it totally does work. Like the weird happy accident coincident aspect of it. And as that expanded, it kind of became more of a like I'm gonna write something that matches what's happening in this video because maybe there's too much happening to where the demo just didn't match and it didn't feel right.
Mm.
Uh, and then that became the whole approach altogether was just writing music to the video. Um, and so I started using synthesizers more for that because they worked as a bridge easier, or a glue maybe is the right word for it. To kind of like
Yeah.
match the pieces together so that you know, it gave the desired effect with the video to where like both the visual and auditory aspects were being heightened and expanded on. Um, and I think that just in doing that, I mean, it's fucking fun. Sometimes it's hard sometimes, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And I think the project just kind of like came about from that. It was like, whoa, I just, I think I just finished one of those videos and I was like, I don't want to, I'm not done yet. I want to do another one. Like,
Sweet.
yeah. And then I just kind of started tinkering around with it. And yeah, it just kind of became itself from that.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Is
forgot why I went off on this tangent. There was
No,
some,
you like touched on a couple of things that I wanted to ask you anyway.
good,
So,
good, good.
because yeah, on that I was sort of like, okay, my thought was, all right, Bell Witch has like this, ambient aspect to it, like the intros and the outros of, both of these recent albums have been like very much like synth heavy and like creating that atmosphere. So I thought, okay, maybe you wanted to expand on that and like play with that a little bit more and see what would happen if
Sure,
you didn't have the bass and the drums and any
sure.
voice and just see what you could do with the synths. Um, so were those films, the films were those like created for Bell Witch, like those videos that you were saying?
No, for the Patreon channel, it was taken like I would take a clip from a Tarkovsky film or
Okay.
like from like a Maya Deren film or something like that, and just like find a section that was maybe a cool section that was potent, that like the wild stuff was happening, or maybe not wild stuff. I mean, depending on the film. One of my favorites is the Maya Deren film Meshes of the Afternoon. That I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not, no.
I think it's like a 15-minute movie. And I took like a, I don't know, I think like an 8 minute chunk where there's kind of hard to describe. Like she's walking down the street and she's following this like weird hooded figure, and it's kind of like a Grim Reaper sort of character, but it's
Okay.
also kind of like uh I think it's also supposed to be her consciousness or like a projection of her consciousness. That could be, argued about forever. But she's following it around and it kind of like interacts with her in these strange ways, and the she starts like maybe like gets a little fourth dimensional, and she's in like multiple places at the same time. She's seeing different versions of herself doing all these things, and there's this
Oh,
sort of it's it's fucking awesome. Um so like that for that one, I can't remember if I wrote the song for that or if that was a demo that Jesse and I were working on for Bell Witch. That was one of the earlier ones that I did. But it was yeah, a film that was totally, I mean, I think she made that like in the 50s or the 40s.
so it was something
Um
that just speaks to you anyway, like personally.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's amazing because this is like a whole new way to explore, those things. And like, I often struggle as well to be like, oh, this thing that, it sounds like something. And I'm just like, why am I trying to use words? Why don't I just put it in front of the person or just say like,
Sure.
listen to it? Because sometimes that's the only way. So, it makes sense that it's hard to describe, but my interest is definitely piqued because my like film knowledge, I guess, is pretty, kind of like basic in comparison, but I for sure got a lot of feelings of like the Blade Runner original
Oh, cool,
soundtrack,
cool.
Vangelis
Sure.
soundtrack. There were a couple of points throughout the listen that I was just like, oh my God, I'm like floating over the Tyrell Corporation right now. And
That rules. That
yeah,
rules.
yeah, that like super speaks to me. And like
I
that's
mean, it's
something
kind of a
that,
similar approach, I guess. The idea is just to kind of make something that I mean, that could be played along to those crazy scenes. And I think the synthesizer they use for that is like the size of like a massive desk. That thing's wild. I
yeah,
think.
yeah. So you were saying you've got your synth set up all at home, and I'm curious because again, super basic. I've got like a full-size Casio that like my brother gave me. Oh, hell yeah,
Cool.
look at all those knobs. So it's relatively like compact and just have you started to gear up because of this now?
Yeah, totally. So I'm just like like
Yeah.
before this interview started, I was on my phone just like looking at like at a website. Like, should I buy that thing? I don't know. I kind of want to, but I don't know if I should.
What
Like,
new
well, I have an
pedals can
interview for
I?
this project. Probably okay to buy a nerdy thing for it. I don't know.
Yeah. I heard a new acronym for that, GAS, gear acquisition syndrome. It
Oh
happens.
shit.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah,
happens in a lot of fields.
I like that. Gear acquisition syndrome. That's good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah. And like synths and pedals are definitely in there. So like for the gearheads out there, again, I'm not really one of them. I've got this like full-size Casio and a little Yamaha Reface
That's
DX.
how it all starts, though.
Yeah. I know.
You're going to the dark side already.
Yeah, yeah. So is there anything that's like your main kind of like when you're going to like noodle something out? Like what do you go to in your setup?
Sure, sure. I use a Moog Sub 37 a lot, which is pretty cool. It can do anything. It does like the super low stuff really well. It's like low droning notes. It excels at that. And like high uh more melodic things, it does that. It's really versatile. Um, throw a handful of pedals on it too, and it's triples, quadruples uh in its versatility and what it can do. And I mean, and I imagine it would be the same for that Casio you've got.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. It's like my younger brother got sick of it because it's like the keys are not, smooth enough for him or whatever.
Ah,
And I
ah.
was like, I will take it.
He
But
has gear
yeah,
acquisition syndrome, it sounds like.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's kind of like sometimes I feel like if you only have the few things to use, though, it makes you sort of like think about how you can use those in more creative ways. Like maybe that's been an element of it as well.
That's fair. That's very fair. Yeah, because yeah, when you have a million things, it's almost like, how do I even start? Like, you need something to kind of focus and expand off of. Yeah, so yeah, that's I feel that. I feel that.
Yeah. Are there any other like films or inspiring pieces that are kind of like floating around in your head right now that you're planning to work on?
Um, I'm working on there's a Japanese film. I can't remember the director's name. It's called Pastoral to Die in the Country, which is like a strange name. There's like a semicolon in there.
Hmm.
But it's kind of like Holy Mountain in some ways. Like it's super surreal and maybe kind of hard to follow, and there's a lot happening. Um, eh, it's also yeah, it's also kind of there's some of the visual aspects are kind of like the color of pomegranates, which is I can't remember that director's name either. I think he's from Georgia,
Hmm.
the in Asia. Anyhow, it's like it's a beautiful film, and the storyline is really fucking cool, and it's like halfway through the movie where it's like, oh, I understand what's going on. There's this whole like complicated plot that was, for me at least, it was like way over my head until like the halfway mark. Then I'm like, oh, and a fun thing about doing those Patreon videos is I have to go through and kind of like find the chunk that I want to work on. And so I kind of have to try to find the essence of what's not necessarily in the whole movie, but like at least in a part. So if there's going to be a plot line portrayed in the clip I'm using, I have to figure out how to do that, which is kind of fun. And in this particular movie, the visual aspects are just wild. Like he's just doing the coolest stuff. Um, there's this one particular scene that I mean, it only happens once and it's like 2 seconds long, but it's just this guy playing a cello on top of this little stream that seems to be red because of the saturation of the camera. And it's just like, what is
Hmm.
that? It's so fucking cool.
Whoa.
Um, and I think that those sort of things instigate like anyone watching it starts to apply a meaning to it when and every like you and might even have different meanings to how we apply to it based off of however we experience the world day to day, and that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
one thing can mean something totally different to two different people. It's like I don't know, it's a cool thing about movies, or maybe
Yeah.
anything for that matter, but movies in particular with like moving images, it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has to, again, you're touching on like things that I want to ask about, and I'm like, we could go on for the entire evening because like,
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
a big theme here in the album and what you're kind of like pursuing here is like perception and different philosophies about like how people see themselves in the world, particularly themselves, right? That's the album title particularly is referring to like if I interpret this correctly, it's like a reflection kind of oneself and how that's perceived once you're like split into two, which I thought was a
Sure.
cool place to start. Yeah, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Totally, yeah. Like flatworm mysticism. I think the idea would be like a flatworm. I don't know if this is true for like every type of flatworm. I think it is. I'm not a biologist, I suppose. But like if a flatworm gets cut in half, the two halves can kind of like they just both become two different flatworms.
Wow.
Whereas like if someone cut me in half, I would just become a guy I'd just be half a guy. My legs probably just I don't know, get thrown in the trash. I don't know what they do with them. But whereas a flatworm, there'd be two different worms that would kind of go in both encounter the world from different ways moving forward. I think they both would have the same DNA though, because they were both from the same source.
Yeah.
So like
Not a
it's like they're
biologist either, but
sure, sure, yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think we're doing all right so far with the biology stuff. But yeah, like it'd be like two it's almost like two of the same animal or the same creature, but it's two different of the same creature, which is I mean, that's fucked up in and of itself just to say out loud. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
think that like they're both coming from the same place, but then they're going to encounter things differently. And I guess the idea kind of came about because this project is kind of a weird split off from Bell Witch. Like it's kind of still of like I think this will always be some paired in some regard to it because it's kind of coming from the exact same place. It's just a different approach.
yeah. I thought of it as a tangent. I was like, that's yeah.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it that's the perfect way to put it. So yeah, flatworm mysticism felt like the perfect way to describe it because it's just kind of this thing that's just separating off because of this other avenue that was just kind of just started during the pandemic to I mean, I think we were all kind of going crazy during the lockdowns. We can't go do
Yeah,
anything. We've got to
yeah.
do something.
Yeah, I heard a lot of that too, like
Yeah.
in a weird way that kind of like spurred creativity again, because it's like, well, I can only do so much. I don't have all of these possibilities in front of me. So what
Yeah.
do I do? Like, yeah, and like you said, like diving into films that you find like, so wild and weird that you can't even really like interpret them in your head. It's just like, okay, but what can I do alongside this? I think that's amazing. That's where like that's the seed of like so many like beautiful innovations that you don't plan for these
Sure.
things, they just occur. And there's also a fair amount of reference in here, I guess, to, I'm looking at your bookshelf with such envy right now.
Oh, right on, right on.
um yeah, because the album, sorry, the project title, admittedly, my like amateur francophone self, that was the first thing I saw. I was like, huh, je est un autre. That is grammatically incorrect.
Yes, yes, totally.
And then I looked and I was like, because I had to know, I was like, how did this happen? And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a quote from this philosopher that I'm not familiar with, but it actually has like a really, like a deep meaning to it, with talking about, the way that a person is not necessarily just like, I guess the way I would interpret it is like, the sum of just like your ego and all of the things that you perceive. Like
Yeah.
you're a combination of all of these things that you're encountering in the world all the time. And with what we were saying before with the flatworm thing, it's like that same thing can split off and be two different entities, but now they're both gonna have different, like there's nature nurture.
Sure. Yeah.
And so yeah, they're both gonna be nurtured in different ways. So yeah, who is that? I'm not familiar with the philosopher. It's
Arthur Rimbaud.
yes, yes.
Um, yeah, and I think that he wrote the phrase, I think, in like a couple different letters that he was sending to various people. And I mean, I think he was trying to get a lot across, but I think some of the ways he was using to describe it, there's one where he's talking about like what is a violin? And it's like, well, a violin is obviously like an object, um, that maybe just does one thing. It makes sounds. Um, but like a a separate entity has to come along to make it make sounds, and what that entity puts into it is sort of like the violin in some regards is capable of the grandest, the most amazing music humans can perceive, but it has to
Right.
be communicated through that. And it's like, what is communicating it through that? And I think that if we thought of our of a human thought of themselves as a in the same way that I'm talking about that violin, um, like in some regard, like we all surprise ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe different ways, of course, but because we are like we can do wild shit. Like we can blow ourselves away. Like, how did I come up with that? And I think applying that same logic of the violin, like if we think of ourselves as the violin, it's like, what is, I mean, I think everyone's probably had the experience where they do maybe in a creative realm or in whatever realm where they came up with something where like, that's fucking brilliant. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Like, how did that just like pop out of my brain? And it's almost like there's this separate entity, be it like a subconscious, which I guess would be the same entity, or I mean, I think that like, that gets into a whole religious you could take that into a religious route if you wanted to. You could take it into like um is this something that I learned in my childhood, or is it something that I genetically inherited from my parents, or you know
Yeah.
the
What am I channeling right now? Where is
yeah, like
this?
where the hell did that come from? And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
and the translation would JE EST UN AUTRE would be like the I is another, and like there's this other entity almost that's sort of maybe not like a puppet master, but like it's sort of con maybe controlling things, or maybe not like a puppet master. Maybe it's just influencing things. It's involved. It's like present. It's sort of the hand on the violin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like the violin and the hand are working together. Like without the violin, the hand isn't can't really get much across at all. But without the hand, the violin can't get anything across either. So there's like
Yeah.
this weird symbiotic thing going on. I think that's a lot of what he was trying to get across with it. Of course, I think it's more than that also, because I think it could be taken in a million different directions. And yeah. Although I feel like I've drank enough coffee where I could take it in a million different directions right now.
Well, because we're getting near the end of I'm
Indeed,
like, I know
yes.
that we could talk about this forever, but you know who you should talk about this with? When you are touring soon with Bell Witch,
Hmm.
you and the hooded entities of Thanafaxath,
Ah, yes.
if you've never had this conversation before, you're gonna have it with them.
Awesome. Awesome.
We're very close and we've had similar talks many times. I feel like you will definitely be aligned.
That's killer. They didn't play that show. The name of that venue is escaping me now, that had the Motorhead skull on it.
Coalition? It's
It wasn't them, but
possible. It's
maybe
very
there was
possible.
somebody from Thanafaxa that was in a different band that played that night or something
Also
like
extremely possible.
that. Okay.
Without saying too much, they've maintained the anonymity for so long. I'd hate to be the
Oh,
one
yes,
to
that's right.
blow it for
Right.
them now. But yes, that would be extremely possible. I'll just say
Okay.
that
Cool.
much.
Cool. Right on. Right on.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a super that I'm so excited to see, some clips from that. I wish that I could be following along, that whole European tour. And I guess the follow-up I have from that is, do you think that you'll end up playing any of this project live, maybe after that's done, getting into the planning stages, or maybe
I
during, or
I want to for sure. I think when I was first starting it out and like even maybe finishing the album, it was like just no way. Like I had even like considered it a possibility, I guess. And a buddy of mine, Logan, he's in the death metal band Cystic. He has a dark ambient project that when I like did the announce for this, he wrote me, he was like, "Hey, let's do a fucking show." And I'm like, "Oh, oh yeah, I don't even know how to do that." But yes, I think it'll have to happen someday.
Yeah, yeah. There's a whole other, like, sure, there's like doom and there's bass and there's drums and there's like intense metal shit. And then, of course, there's this whole other realm that, people are into it. So do it. I highly, highly endorse this idea.
Right on, right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And your setup is compact, so you don't even have to worry about like, loading in your
Yeah.
gear and stuff. Like,
There's no cabinets to carry around and vans or anything, any of that nonsense.
yeah, yeah, you're set. All right. Well, I look forward to, hopefully seeing some announcements about Toronto visits, or at least, anywhere in the area, I can make it
Right on.
happen. Montreal, Toronto, close enough.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So again, super excited. I'm so stoked to see, more people pick this up and hear where people take it. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of like interpretations as well. And, you never know what people are going to come up with to like, I wouldn't be surprised if someone started to make videos to accompany the album that is
That'd be
already
awesome.
like, yeah,
That'd be
yeah.
too cool.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of like a natural reaction and accompaniment, and you put it out there and you open up those possibilities and people will jump on them.
Totally, totally.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I guess that's probably all that we have time for, but Dylan, so awesome to meet you. So great to get to
Likewise.
pick your brain a little bit. There's
Yeah, yeah, totally.
lots in there to pick at.
Yeah, likewise, likewise.
Yeah, yeah, and have fun with, the rest of the release. The album's coming out on March 1st, right? Right?
Yes, indeed.
Calendar. So
Dead
three
on.
weeks, 3 weeks from now. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, well, enjoy, best of luck, and thank you so much for the gift of all of these sounds. And
Yeah,
yeah,
thanks for
hope
listening.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah, looking forward to what's to come.
Right on, right on.
Yeah,
Well, have a good evening and talking again soon, maybe.
yeah. All right. Good night.
All right, take care.
Bye.